I know I can do it, Todd Downey said, helping himself to another ear of corn from the steaming bowl. I'm sure that in time, every bit of her will be gone, and her death will be a mystery, even to me. Hey, Watchers. Today we're covering another film based on a short story by one of our favorite authors, Stephen King.
We're continuing on our plan to work our way through every movie based on King's work, and this is definitely a low-key fanboy topic for us.
So grab a shovel and butter some corn. I can't lose it's so hard for me to lose that accent afterwards. But, all right. But, yeah, grab a shovel and butter some corn. It's time for the breakdown of 2004's psychological horror thriller, Secret Window. Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the show where we discuss classic, cult, and modern classic movies.
We're your hosts, Josh and Jeremy, and we try to review movies that are at least 10 years old and see what kind of impact they made or are still making on culture and the film industry.
We rate these movies in 4 categories: the level of impact and success it had when it was released. We rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, the level of impact and success it had when it was released. Number 2, how relevant it is. Oh my God, I'm like killing it today. Number two, how relevant is it today? Number 3, our personal own enjoyment. Number 3.
Is this a 2-beer podcast tonight?
I haven't even drank. This is totally sober. Number 3.
That's the problem.
Number 3, our own personal enjoyment of this movie. Number 4, is it a midnight watch?
Well, Jeremy, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that listens to the show, but we love Stephen King. This is our 4th episode so far that we're covering a movie based on Mr. King's work, and it's going to be a sad day when we eventually run out of his movies. But thankfully, that day is a long way off, if you know what I mean. So, what are some Secret Window fun facts to kick this off with?
Thinking about how many different movies there are based off of Stephen King's books, when we do one a month, pretty much, that might be several years down the road. But even then, like, they're constantly coming out with new Stephen King stuff. Like, he's got kind of a renaissance for sure, like, of coming back and stuff. So,
plus, if we did get to that point where we ran out of actual movies, there's a lot of TV spin-off stuff we could always get into as well.
Oh, the TV stuff, yeah, for sure. So that's some of the best worst stuff there too. All right, for Secret Window, let's see. It was directed by, and the screenplay was written by David Coep, and then he wrote other he was basically a screenwriter, and he wrote Jurassic Park, Spider-Man, Mission Impossible, Panic Room, and the classic Indiana Jones 4. Well, that's up for debate, but
but he might wish that that wasn't part of his credits.
Right, but hey, at least he got paid for it. And then he also did the Jurassic Park. The Lost World, which is pretty awesome. But the thing that I think is funny about the Jurassic Park, The Lost World, the one scene when Johnny Depp almost falls off the couch and you see the waterfall, that's actually that's footage from The Lost World. It's B-roll that they didn't use. How cool is that?
I saw that. That was super cool.
I was like, what? Okay, so David Coep, I'm going to say it straight off the bat. I think this movie is his strongest movie because he hasn't directed a lot of good movies. Like he directed Premium Rush, which is Stir of Echoes, which some people like. He directed Ghost Town, which I did not see, and then Mordecai.
That's funny.
Yeah, but that's I mean Ricky Gervais. When is he not funny? That guy is just freaking hilarious.
He's such a you love him or you hate him. There's really no in between. So it was either a great movie or a terrible movie.
I know, right? He's that guy that. At the party where you're like, dude, that guy's hilarious. And then he starts making jokes about you and you're like, hey, man, knock it off.
Right. Guy's a jerk.
Right? I know. Looks like the score of this movie was by Philip Glass. I'm not familiar with other work that he's done. You familiar with his stuff?
No.
James Newton Howard was going to do the soundtrack, actually, with Hans Zimmer. And then they actually had to back out because they were starting to focus on another movie. So I really like the score of this film, though, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not that bad. I mean, it's not like it doesn't really stand out a whole lot, but there's some bad soundtracks out there. some bad composing, and it's not one of those.
No. The budget here was $40 million, and then they made back $92 million worldwide. So it was a soft hit, I guess I would say. So with that one, like they made their money, they didn't lose that money, but they didn't blow it out of the water. But also, it wasn't super expensive to make, which is a lot of reasons why we get a ton of crappy horror movies is because they're not really expensive to make, and they can make their money back pretty easily. But let's see, the cast is Johnny Depp, John Turturro, Maria Bello, Timothy Hutton, Charles Dutton, and Len Cariou, who's the sheriff. So there's not that many people in this movie compared to like the last several movies that we've done. This movie is a very self-contained, like it basically happens mainly out in the house and then flashbacks and like other stuff.
Yeah, and it feels like the short story that it's based off of. Which,
did you read the short story?
So I've been debating with myself for a week now. I swear I've read this book. Like I know what the stories are in it. It's
a 4 Past
novella.
Midnight.
Yeah, and Langoliers. This story. What's the other one? The library. Policeman.
I never read this.
And then You ever read this one?
No,
And the last story was the Sun Dog, and I really feel like I remember the Sun Dog. So I read a lot of his short story collections kind of at once, and I just pounded through it. So I feel like I forgot more than I remember when it comes to this stuff. I swear I've read this short story though, but it's also a very similar story to was it The Darker Half?
The Dark Half?
The Dark Half.
Well, that I did read. So I kind of disagree with you on that. I feel like the only thing that's similar with that is they're both writers, which Stephen King writes a lot about writers.
Right. But, well, I agree because it's also kind of similar. Well, never mind. I'll get into that later. But yeah. So, anyways, I can't remember. I swear I read the story, but now I read the Cliff Notes on it basically on Wikipedia, and I was just like, oh man, now I'm not sure.
Right. Like when I was watching the movie, I was like, dang it, I never read this story that this movie's based off of. And I was like, I'm going to let the people down, Josh. I'm going to let them down.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to go back and remedy this after this sometime. So
right.
I swear I was starting to read The Langoliers though, because that was actually pretty creepy. Maybe I was just watching the TV movie we'll get to that eventually.
Right.
But anyways, Josh, how about that synopsis before we deep dive?
All right, well, let's give you the rundown of the plot here.
Let's do it.
Once again, this comes courtesy of the Wikipedia.
That is our intern, Mr. Wikipedia.
Right, Wikipedia, Mr. Pedia. After catching his wife Amy having an affair with their friend Ted, mystery writer Mort Rainey retreats to his cabin at Tashmore Lake in upstate New York, depressed and suffering from writer's block. 6 months pass, and Mort has delayed finalizing the divorce. One day, a drawling Mississippian named John Shooter arrives at the cabin and accuses Mort of plagiarizing his short story, Sowing Season. Upon reading Shooter's manuscript, Mort discovers it is virtually identical to his own story, Secret Window, except for the ending. The following day, Mort, who once plagiarized another author's story, tells Shooter that his story was published 2 years before Shooter's, invalidating his plagiarism claim. Shooter demands proof and warns Mort against contacting the police. That night, Mort's dog Chico is found dead outside the cabin, along with a note from Shooter giving Mort 3 days to provide proof. Mort reports the incident to Sheriff Newsom. Mort drives to his and Amy's house intending to retrieve the magazine in which his story was published, but leaves because Ted and Amy are there. Mort hires private investigator Ken Karsh, who stakes out the cabin and speaks to Tom Greenleaf, a local resident who may have seen Shooter and Mort talking together. At the cabin, Shooter demands that Mort revise his story's ending to Shooter's version, where the protagonist kills his wife. When an arson fire destroys Amy and Mort's house, Mort reveals to the police that he has an enemy. Karsh tells Mort that he suspects Shooter has threatened Greenleaf after Greenleaf claimed he never saw Mort and Shooter talking together. Mort and Karsh agree to confront Shooter, but first will meet up with Greenleaf at the local diner the next morning. Arriving late, Mort discovers that neither Karsh nor Greenleaf showed at the diner. Mort encounters Ted at a gas station, where Ted demands Mort sign the divorce papers. Believing Shooter is in Ted's employ, Mort refuses, taunts Ted, and leaves. Shooter summons Mort to a meeting place. When he arrives, Mort finds Karsh and Greenleaf dead inside Greenleaf's truck. Shooter arrives and says the two men had interfered with his business. Shooter warns that he has implicated Mort in the two men's murders. Mort agrees to meet Shooter at his cabin to show him the magazine containing his story. Mort then pushes Greenleaf's truck off the steep cliff into a water-filled quarry where it sinks. While moving the vehicle, Mort's wristwatch is accidentally ripped off and left inside the truck cab. Mort's literary agent has sent a copy of the magazine with his story. The packet has already been opened and Mort's story ripped out from the magazine. At the cabin, Mort sees Shooter's hat and puts it on. He begins speaking to himself, trying to make sense of the events. Mort realizes that Shooter is a figment of his imagination, a created character brought to life through Mort's undetected dissociative identity disorder, adopted to carry out malevolent, there we go, third time's a charm, malevolent task.
Sounds like an off-brand ice cream flavor.
Or, anyway. Carrying out malevolent tasks like killing Chico, Greenleaf, and Karsh, as well as arson. Amy arrives and sees the word Shooter carved repeatedly on the cabin's walls and furniture. Mort appears, speaking and acting as Shooter and wearing his hat, which a flashback reveals Mort previously bought at a flea market. Amy realizes the name Shooter represents Mort's desire to shoot her. He chases Amy and stabs her in the ankle. Ted, looking for Amy, arrives and is ambushed by Mort, who smashes his face with a shovel. Amy watches helplessly as Mort beheads Ted with a shovel and does the same to her, reciting the ending of sowing season. Mort recovers from writer's block, and his overall mood improves. Mort is feared and shunned in town. Sheriff Newsom arrives and warns Mort that he is the prime suspect in the supposed murders. He will eventually be caught and says he is no longer welcome in town. Mort passively dismisses the threat. In Mort's writing loft is a previously hidden window overlooking the garden. It is implied that Amy and Ted's bodies are buried under the corn growing there, allowing Mort to slowly destroy any evidence of their murders. In an alternate, longer version of the scene, Ted and Amy's bodies are shown buried beneath the corn, and Mort, very contentedly, eats the corn.
I actually thought that last scene when he bites into the corn is pretty gross. Like they did that on purpose. For the whole like the extra like gross sound, which the sound design in this movie I think is really well done. I will definitely say I think that the weakest part of this movie I actually think is the script, because there's not a lot that happens in this story. So I feel like they did a pretty good job on like every other aspect of this movie.
Right. It's like one of those, it's definitely a well-made movie, and Johnny Depp, I feel like, was right kind of towards the peak of where he was his most awesome in movies. He had just done the first Pirates movie, so Jack Sparrow was like this masterpiece of a character. He had a couple more good years, and then they just, I don't know if it just turned into a paycheck for him, but he basically just kept doing Jack Sparrow over and over and over. Well, he did Finding Neverland. That one was really good. He did that one right after this one, I think, or one or two after.
He did, since this movie Secret Window, they moved it up actually a month because of how popular Pirates of the Caribbean was. So, because like I didn't really know who Johnny Depp was before this movie came out, but that doesn't really say much because I wasn't watching a lot of movies back then. But Pirates of the Caribbean, that blew up. Like the first one was just like, boom. And he became like an A-lister overnight because he'd been around for a long time. Yeah,
and he'd done a lot of really cool artsy kind of movies.
Right.
And he definitely did some bigger ones that were kind of artsy after the fact. Like I really liked Sweeney Todd.
Yeah, that was good.
I think that was a fun one. And then Black Mass is awesome. That's probably the last great movie he's done, in my opinion.
I agree. No, because that one he's cold. He's so cold in that movie. And I totally agree.
And he really showed off his acting chops of being able to completely become another character. He is not sexy in that movie. Almost every other movie he's in, he's got that sex appeal going, and well, he's playing Whitey, what's his face, a bald, crazy, Irishman. It was
Yeah, he was
Amazing.
cold. Yeah, because he was a sex symbol, and well, I don't know if he was a sex symbol, but anyways, he was a hottie in the '80s with 21 Jump Street, and then he was in the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So I know that he had always wanted to do more serious things. So of course in the '90s, they did like every other year. It was in a movie with Tim Burton, and which you were a big Tim Burton fan, and had seen a lot more Tim Burton movies like Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, all that stuff.
Right.
And so, when
Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow. And so when this movie came out, like the rest of the world caught up with like, oh, Johnny Depp's actually a really good actor. And so Johnny Depp's it up pretty solid in this film.
Like it's his quirky, eccentric kind of self, which is what he's known for and does really well doing in a lot of movies,
Yeah, and he definitely carries this movie for sure.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, it's all about Johnny Depp.
Yeah. And I read a comment online where they were like, this movie is actually about Johnny Depp's hair. And I was like, yeah, I can see that. Cause like, his hair's all super messy. And then like, like it's definitely almost a character in itself.
Right. I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of blonde Johnny Depp. I know it was.
I'm a huge fan, Josh.
I'm exactly. I'm gonna say. I'm sure some people will fight me over that statement, but I don't know. I enjoy darker Johnny. Darker hair Johnny.
I'm just
Depp
envious of the straight hair because my hair curls. I call it the hurl. The hurl. But yeah, let's get into the movie. I don't have a lot of trivia on this one. What was the first time you saw this movie? By the way, this movie came out in 2003. Four. That's what I said. Yeah, 2004, guys.
Yep. So that was the year my older daughter Ryan was born. Nice. So I was pretty busy that year. But for some reason, I swear, and I don't think I saw it that year. I feel like I saw it maybe the next year. Like it was still kind of a new movie, and I swear that you were super hyped about this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I feel like you had talked it up a lot, and maybe you even bought it, and then you were like, you got to watch this movie. It's amazing. And I think because you were kind of new to Johnny Depp maybe. And and I either think you came over to my house and we watched it, or maybe I borrowed it, or maybe I watched it at Mom and Dad's with you.
Maybe.
But I feel like you were very much a part of watching that movie when it came out.
No, I believe that because I went to go watch a movie. That was right when I was starting to get into watching movies. And so I went to go, I can't remember what movie I was going to see at this rinky-dink theater, but they were playing Dawn of the Dead and Secret Window in the same theater. And so at the time I was just like, I'll go see if I was waiting for my movie. I got there a half hour early. So I was like, well, I'm going to see if I can check out maybe part of Dawn of the Dead's playing. And I walked in there and it was Secret Window playing instead, which I didn't really have any interest in seeing originally. But then that was the scene where he has to drop the truck off over the quarry and he gets his watch stuck. And so that scene though, since I was still new to movies and theaters, really stuck with me. And I was like, oh, this is an intense movie. And I was like, oh, my movie's started. I got to leave. And so I was like, I need to watch this movie. And then I ended up buying it, and the ending just blew me away. I was like, wow, this movie's amazing. And so
you're like, no way,
dude.
What?
He was the murderer. What? Yeah. And so
he is John Turturro.
Right. John Turturro, is he? And so that's probably why I was wigging out over it. But then, which was fun that we picked this movie, because then I haven't seen this movie in 15 years, man.
Oh, for real? Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time. And maybe when we watched it together was the only time I've seen it. I feel like I haven't seen it in such a long time.
I remember the DVD, so I'm sure I had this movie. I got on a Johnny Depp kick, and I was like, I started collecting movies, and I was like, I'm gonna buy every movie that Johnny Depp's been in.
I remember that. Yeah.
And
the first time I saw it, or even heard of Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man.
Oh yeah.
Or was you had it? I'm like, what is this? I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, I was going on there. I was collecting anything he was in, even a cameo, and I got burned out because he's in a lot of bad movies. but that movie. I need to rewatch that movie too, because that was the first Jim Jarmusch movie I saw, and I did not know what I was getting into. So I was like,
no. And if you're used to pop culture, blockbuster Johnny Depp movies and you watch that one and you're not seeing a lot of indie movies, that you're in for a rude awakening. You're like, what is this garbage? Which I kind of agree, because I remember watching some of it with you back then, and I was still kind of new into enjoying indie movies. And then I watched it maybe 5 or 6 years ago with my old movie club and loved it. I'm like, man, this movie is awesome. But I love most stuff by Jim Jarmusch at this point.
I need to go. Yeah, I didn't like his stuff at first. Ghost Dog is his. I don't know if we're gonna.
That's like one of the only ones I haven't seen.
Dude. Okay, maybe. Okay, we will review that movie then, because that movie is a very unique movie. Yeah, so we'll review it. That way you'll be forced to watch it. So
that would be fun, because I've always heard so much about it, and I've seen a lot of, like I've seen most of his other movies. I don't love all of his movies, but I love at least. Well, there's even in the movies of his that I don't like, there's parts of it that I really like. He's just that kind of a filmmaker. Anyways, this is not about Jim Jarmusch.
Another thing about Jim Jarmusch. No.
All right, I'm gonna bring it back.
All right,
so
back.
my favorite part of this movie, and I was blown away. I don't really remember this from the first time I watched it, and all the way through the movie, I'm like, man, that was the best part. The first 2 minutes of the movie were brilliant to me. I feel like it could have been a 2-minute short film, and because it told such a good story, and just the way the shots were, and was a lot of like continuous kind of camera angles, and it was super intense, and it ends with him screaming at in her face.
Right.
If anybody wants to know what I'm talking about. So the movie opens with him. He's sitting in his car and he's looking in the rearview mirror, and he's like, you can hear him talking to himself. He's like, don't go in there. Just walk away. Just leave. And then he puts the car in gear and he starts to drive he's talking to himself. And then he ends up just slamming it in reverse and going backwards, or he flips around. I can't remember. Goes back to the hotel, gets out of the car, walks into the manager's office, walks behind the counter because no one's there, sees it. He's looking for a room key. He grabs the key, walks out, gets back in the car, smashes down to where the room is at, gets out of the car, basically kicks the door in, and finds his wife and her lover Ted in bed. And he just walks up to her and he just screams in her face. And I think he walks out. But it's so intense, and it tells this whole little story of this guy catching his wife cheating and what he's going through, and it was really, really cool. I feel like it was almost unrelated to the rest of the movie of how intense it was.
I agree. I think that scene is probably it's the most there. Okay, so there's some really cool shots in this movie, and I agree, because that opening shot is like almost a classic Hitchcock shot where like the camera stays on him. The camera never moves. They don't cut for like the first minute of the movie. And so when he's driving, it's snowing outside, so you can't see anything except for him. And the sound design in this movie is really well done. And so then like the thing that's cool too is the camera's like, you think the camera's mounted inside the car. And then like at the end, when he like backs up again to go to the manager's office, then the camera is stable, and then the car pulls away from the camera. And it's just this really cool fluid shot.
Super cool. Yeah.
And I was just like, all right, this is cool. I'm conflicted about this movie, because like I really liked parts of it, and like the cinematography. John Turturro kills it. I love like he is so good in whatever he does. He's so good at like portraying multiple different types of characters, different nationalities, like different areas that he's from. He's got super Southern drawl, but I mean, it's different though than from Oh Brother Where Art Thou, because like in Oh Brother Where Art Thou, he's like dumb and funny, and in this one he's like cold and
like and sinister and funny.
Yeah, and you're just like, dude, this guy's
he's not even really funny. He's dark.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's funny. Yeah,
if you like immediately, like if you're an Oh Brother fan, and if you're familiar with John Turturro, it does kind of make you laugh a little bit, because he kills with that Southern accent.
He does.
He's just so good at it. It's like, to me, I just felt like in this movie, it was like an effortless role for him.
Which is funny, because he actually, the reason, I got a little bit of trivia on here. You got a little more trivia? Yeah, I got a little bit of trivia here. Apparently his son is a huge fan of Stephen King. And so he took the role because his son's a big fan. And so cool. Otherwise he wasn't super interested in it. And then the other bit of trivia was the part where Johnny Depp busts in the apartment, or the motel room at the beginning. the two, Maria Bello and Timothy Hutton, were waiting in bed for like 15 minutes with the lights out, waiting for him to come in the room so that they were gonna like react. And so like the scene when he kicks the door open, I guess they immediately kicked on like extremely loud music and the lights. So it was like as soon as he kicked it, it triggered that, and so it was like bah, and so.
Did they not know about it?
They didn't know about it. They legit, like, that was a legit jump. Both of them were like, whoa. And so that adds to the intensity of that moment, which is pretty legit. Yeah.
That is super cool. Because, it is amazing. I swear to all y'all listening to this, even if you don't feel like watching this movie, if, I don't know, maybe it's on YouTube. I didn't even look. But if you can watch that opening sequence, it's just, if you're just a fan of movies and great sequences, like, this is one of them. This is just really well done.
This movie, I think this movie actually, for its time, the trailer is dated, but I feel like for its time, it basically, it takes all the best parts from the movie, like the actual camera shots that are really cool, and the suspense in this movie, I think, is actually done pretty well for a while because you don't know what's going on, but I really feel like they could have fleshed out the screenplay more because there's multiple parts that they just kind of breeze over. Like, for example, I really liked the detective that he hires. I thought his character was really cool. And then, like, also, apparently something has happened with Mort before in the past. And at first, the way they said, like, he paid the guy to go away. And they said, like, something has happened like this before with somebody.
Plagiarizing.
Like, with somebody, messing with him. And
no, it was because he actually did plagiarize once before.
I thought that they alluded to. Did they come
no,
out?
They straight up said, because she asked him later, like, you didn't do it again, did you? And he's like, no, I didn't. Because then something I read about was that Stephen King was accused numerous times of plagiarizing, and though none of it was ever proven with him, but he had people at different times coming out saying, oh, you stole this idea from me and this and that, and but it was never proven. So this was definitely taken from his life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I found out too, somebody actually broke into his house one time and like to confront him or something, and only his wife was home and no one got hurt. But that was kind of
that's
tied
scary
into this movie as well. Yeah, super scary.
Yeah,
it sucks being a famous person when it comes to that. And he's kind of a private. Well, I mean,
you have to be.
He's not. He's approachable, because I've heard so many cool stories of people talking to him because he's kind of unrecognizable unless you know who you're looking for.
Right.
But he definitely has his privacy though. Like the house has got a big, huge fence and everything. And
right. Well, I mean, you have to. He's so famous, like, for his writing. Like, he outsells so many other authors, and whether you love him or hate him, he's just got a lot of books out there now too. And the more you got out there, and then the reprintings, all that jazz. Yeah.
So something was interesting. This book or this movie does not have, like, it's not Stephen King's The Secret Window. It's not Stephen King Presents, anything like that. Like, his name was really not attached to it. And it's not like they were trying to hide the fact, but it was just, it's just interesting. There's probably a detail I overlooked on that, but that was different from a lot of the other ones where you're like, it's very obvious, oh, that's a Stephen King story. Or,
well, I believe the thing is Stephen King actually sold the rights for this so he could get the rights back to Rose Red, which they turned into, was that Kingdom Hospital? Something like that? That miniseries on TV? That's what I saw, but I don't know if, like, that's why they didn't put his name on there, because you're right. Most of the time they'll be like Stephen King's.
Right. Which to me is a mistake marketing-wise, because you slap Stephen King's name on something, I mean, that's automatically going to draw people in, I would assume.
Well, I'm trying to think of what else came out around that time. They had done a ton of TV movies, because 1408 came out like 3 years later, and that one was like, clearly this is a new Stephen King movie, and I don't know if maybe he wasn't heralded as much as he is now. It'd be interesting to find out if that was the case, but I'm just trying to think if that would hurt the movie or I don't know, because like this movie, I feel like they were trying to make this movie be like an art house film, and instead of like a straight up slasher, because it is like a suspense movie. It's not a horror movie; it's a suspense movie.
Right, but it has the horror element to me definitely comes in more at the end of the movie.
Right.
I mean, if you're really easily frightened, then yeah, this could be a horror movie. It's a very soft one, I guess, if you want to call it that. I mean, it is, at least on Wikipedia and other places I've seen it, it is considered a horror movie, but it's very tame. I think that's a little bit weak.
I still don't think it's a horror movie. Because, I mean, I guess technically, because there's a couple jump scares that I don't feel like they were real jump scares, but they were just kind of like minor ones.
Right.
But the end of the movie, though, like when he gets to with a shovel and all that, like the sounds that they choose and stuff, and then like when he's trying to freaking cut off Timothy Hutton's head, and he's like, right. And he's just, you could tell, like you don't see a lot of violence actually in this movie.
No,
I think
most of it's already happened, or it's off screen when it happens.
Right, or they cut away from it real quick. They don't dwell on it at all. The part that did really make me mad though is when like they find his dog like stabbed to death.
Oh, I know, yeah, killing the dog. That's just wrong.
That
was something I saw when I was reading the Cliff Notes on the book. It was actually a cat in the original story.
Oh, I wonder if, I don't know. Stephen King must have a cat because he has a lot of cats in his stories.
Yeah, I think he does, but it's I just lost my train of thought on that. But anyways, circling back around, let me bring it back.
Let's do it.
So something for those of you that aren't, maybe that big of Stephen King fans or fans at all, he's definitely kind of obsessed with the fear of writer's block. It's come up in numerous stories, and in fact, he did an entire like novel about 10 years ago called Lisey's Story. And it's just all about writer's block. And he kind of goes into what writers do. Basically, when you got a hot hand and the writing's just coming, a writer will a lot of times just write several novels and then just throw them in a box for a rainy day. And that way, because a lot of these, if you're a big time writer, you have a contract, you got to put out X amount of books in X amount of years, whether it's one book a year, one book every 2 years. So sometimes, when the creativity is really, really on you, you stack up your books, and that way when you do hit a point where you got nothing, but hey, guess what? It's time to deliver your latest book to the publisher. Well, you just go to the old box of backup books and you pull one out, and there you go. So that's something that and I get it. I mean, that's your livelihood. That's got to be terrifying to, I mean, as a musician, I know sometimes I have zero inspiration. I can't write anything to save my life. And other times I just, they're just flying at me as quick as I can record them.
Right.
So I get that, but that's a big thing. And so that's definitely in this story. And then he definitely he's really good at showing the unraveling of the human mind, of the psyche.
Right.
He's all about that. And you definitely see that in this movie. It's not, there's times in the movie where it's done really well, and other times you're like, oh wow, he's really trying to find somebody else, and there's not as many clues to the fact that Johnny Depp's character's really coming apart.
Yeah, I don't really. I think this movie kind of cheats in the case of I think like a really good whodunit movie, like especially if the main character is the bad guy, like you got to give little tales here and there, and if you're paying attention. And I'm really bad at guessing. At which I actually consider that to be a blessing, because I can enjoy more movies that way instead of
they don't
get
ruined for you so quick.
Right. But with this one though, I feel like they did kind of cheat on that, where it's like, because like if you had this story where like Tom Green, is that his name in the movie? The guy who sees him, probably not
Greenwood
Tom Green.
Or something. Greenleaf.
Yeah, that will go with Greenleaf.
It's in my notes, but I don't.
My bum is on the cheese. My little shout out to Tom Green. But anyways, like when the detective finds him and he just says he's acting weird, let's go talk to him, and then then you don't find out until like right when he's going crazy, when the big reveal that Johnny Depp is the killer is like, then they show the scene where he's like, hey, I was kind of weird talking because you were by yourself. I mean, I guess that's too big of a giveaway, but I felt like it was like he puts the hat on, and then they're like, all right, now we'll show you all the clues that we didn't show you before that shows that he's crazy. Because then they start talking about, the only thing that they talk about before is they mention something again where it's like, this has happened before, and like his wife is checking in on him. as they're going through this divorce. Like, she's worried about him, and she feels sort of bad, I guess.
Right. Well, the other thing is too, when she goes to check on him, she goes in the house, she sees the bottle of Jack on the table.
Oh,
and
yeah.
She's all, yep, figures. So the other point that I want to bring up, and this is a really big thing for Stephen King in his personal life and in his characters, and that is dealing with addiction. Because he very much did. And as a writer, I mean, and musicians, a lot of artistic types, painters, I mean, you name it, they rely on substances to, get them into that creative space. And obviously that's not good. It's very destructive. A lot of them end up dying young and, are abusive and this and that, which it's pretty miraculous that Stephen King, was able to come away from, drugs and smoking and drinking and still keep writing. And I mean, me personally, I love his newer stuff as much as I love his older stuff. It's different. He's evolved, but it's still amazing. I like seeing the journey of his writing from beginning to end, so that's pretty amazing. But that's a huge thing for him, and you see it's a reoccurring theme in a lot of his books. Yeah, and you see that in the movie with him struggling with wanting to smoke and don't do it. No, I'm going to smoke. So I think, obviously, maybe she's thinking, when he had writer's block before, he spiraled and was, super self-destructive. Maybe that's what she was referring to. I
don't know. I was feeling like he had kind of glitched out before, and she was like, are you having like another mental breakdown? Like, that's how I kind of picked it up on this time, because and that's where I was like, I want to see more of that. First off, I want to see though, like, why did she leave him and then cheat on him? And then he of course flipped out, and then they show the reason it says shooter is because at the very end they show the flashback where he's like, I had a gun, I was going to shoot you both in the apartment complex, or the apartment, or the motel. Right. And which I think actually, I mean, I guess it would have been harder to hide what that name is if it's saying stab her or shovel her. That doesn't make sense as a person's last name. What's your name? Shoveler. Right. But then that reminds me of Mystery Man. I shovel well. I shovel very well. But anyways,
yeah. But maybe because of the whole plagiarizing thing. Man, I can't. We're both having a hard time talking.
Plagiarist. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I have an excuse though. I had 3 fillings today, and boy, let me tell you, my doctor was not light on the drugs. Man, he shot my mouth up with so much good stuff.
I couldn't
feel my face for like.
I can't feel my face when I'm with you.
I was thinking about that song while I was sitting in the chair.
The dentist. But I like it. Dentist is like, stop singing, please.
I'm drooling all over the place.
Right? Oh man. Another shout out to the Pale Face with Bob Hope. He literally says that when he's working on somebody. He's like, hey, please, no singing. But anyways, I'm just tired. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. But anyways, so
I was trying to say was when he was, got in trouble for plagiarism, I wonder if it had to do with, writer's block again. So then he decides to steal this unknown, author's or little known author's work because he's got his deadline. He's being destructive and spinning out of control. Yeah. So maybe that's that whole entire thing, that cycle had happened before, and then she was just like, I'm done with you, I'm out. And instead of that happening again this time, obviously the new thing in the mix was the divorce, and that messed with him, and obviously he snapped.
So that would have made it more interesting to me if they like proved that that's why, or maybe not, that's not the only reason that she left him, because like they paint him as the victim for like a while in this movie. But he's not really a nice guy, though. Like, I mean, obviously he's going through a hard time, and he's kind of, pulled back and trying to like get through this hard time and stuff. But I feel like they should have fleshed it out more. And I feel like Timothy Hutton could have brought something a lot more to the role if they gave him a better part.
I feel like he was just a hardcore douchebag in this movie. And I went back and looked at the previous work and things that I'd seen him in. And I don't really see him playing that hard character so much. Usually he's kind of a nicer character.
Right.
Or like the last thing I saw him in, maybe you too, was The Haunting, that series on Netflix. Which
The Haunting of Hill House.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree.
Second season's coming out, by the way.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. Dude, October is going to be lit. But anyways.
Mandalorian.
I know.
Stacked.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyways.
I have another random thing I want to throw out there. Have you read anything by Tom Robbins? Are you familiar with him?
I'm familiar with his work. I have not read any of his stuff, though.
Okay. I have not read any of his work either, but one of my buddies at work is a huge fan. Mm-hmm. And so in this movie, they make Johnny Depp lays down on the couch to take a nap, and they make a very specific point to show him looking at a bookcase across the room, and on the bookcase is a clock, so he sees what time it is, and then right next to the clock is a Tim Robbins book. You can't miss it. It's a very blatant part of the shot, and it's the book Villa Incognito. So I was doing all kinds of research. I'm like, what is that? It has to mean something, right?
Right.
It was a very blatant shot, and when I Googled it, all I could find was that, yes, the director wanted that book to be in the movie, but it was okay. So I think it was a little bit of a shameless plug for Tom Robbins as far as throwing that book in there, because it had come out, I think, the year before, so it was a new book, and he's obviously a bestseller, but it had to do with dealing with, in society, the fallout of the Vietnam War and what that meant, in America post 9/11. So, and it's satire, which is all he does. So it's really twisted, bizarre humor.
Right.
And, so it was super weird. And I was like, what's the connection here? And I think I tried really hard to make something that wasn't really there.
Right.
Well, but I didn't know if you'd read any of his stuff. And
no, I just, I have a friend who was really into him as well. And I just hadn't gotten around to it. And also too, they have, he tosses I think Shooter's hat onto the table, and they have the Rum Diary by Hunter Thompson that's there, which Johnny Depp turns out. Johnny Depp was actually friends with Hunter Thompson, by the way. And, of course, he was in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and he was he did the Rum Diary.
And he was in the Rum Diary. Yeah.
Right. So, so he was friends with him. So I don't know if that was just like a personal thing, because everybody likes to put their little personal touches in, because why not? It's part of your life's work, so I get it.
Sure. And you're the one doing it, so it's your rules. You can put stuff in if you want.
Absolutely.
I was hoping for some deeper meaning in there. And there wasn't.
It was no.
Womp, womp, womp.
But there is a cool Stephen King thing here. If you look closely across the lake at one point, you can see Pennywise. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. But
you had me going there for a second too. I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't know about this.
Okay, no, there is one thing though. Like, so that he actually opens up the book, the magazine that has it, and that's cut out. If you look on the contents, the second story is The Long Walk, which is, of course, Stephen King's.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, Stephen King's book, writing under the name Richard Bachman. I do think it's interesting, though, like, finally admits to himself, he stops lying that he's this psychotic killer. And then at the very end, he's all like, hey, I've got braces on. I'm kind of straightening out a few things. And it's just, he does such a good job in that role. Because, like, the rest of the movie, you're like, poor Johnny Depp, You're kind of a douchebag, but poor Johnny Depp. And in that one scene, he's legit creepy. And he's not really doing anything. He's just, his hair's a little shorter, and he's wearing a different vest, and he just looks kind of...
different glasses.
Right. And it's just, it's a subtle, well done thing. The music...
speaking of subtle, well done, when they flash back to the thrift store or wherever, when he buys the hat and he flips it onto his head, and he comes up a lot, I'm from Mississippi.
Right.
And he's basically trying out the John Turturro character. I thought it was another little subtle touch of him, some acting chops right there. Just a quick scene, but it was cool. And it was kind of like him being creepy at the end, where you're like, oh, it's another facet of his acting ability, which was fun.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. I actually like the music in this movie a lot. I feel like the music helps this movie a lot, because it's the cinematography, the music, and the acting. I think everybody in the movie are good actors. There's just not a lot in this movie, and I think that's why it was it had a me rating by a lot of people. Do you know anybody that like really likes this movie?
No.
I feel like it kind of...
In fact, I feel like it's an under the radar movie. Like, it's not, and only because it's not terrible and it's not great. It's just right there. In fact, Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 5 stars, which...
Really?
Yeah. I mean, even other reviewers, totally trashed it, but he was actually kind of right down the middle of the road. But a lot of it was 100% Johnny Depp that carried the movie.
Absolutely. If Timothy
and
Hutton,
he was up and coming as far, like we were saying, like he was really starting to hit that peak.
Right.
And I think because of Pirates of the Caribbean really putting him on the map, I think this really, if it had been anybody else almost that was kind of unknown, I think it would have just, been a turd, which might have helped it in the long run. But it's definitely just kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Because like I was gonna say, if Timothy Hutton was the main guy, he's a good actor, but if he was the main guy, it would people just wouldn't have seen it. I absolutely agree. It was definitely like up and coming. Oh, it's exciting! Johnny Depp's new movie. He was just in this movie that I really liked. Check him out.
Right.
And also too, there was a lot of movies around that time where it's like, oh, the main guy is actually the murderer, or something crazy is actually different. So kind of like the big plot twist thing. I don't know. It was fun to rewatch this movie though, and kind of revisit the feels of
like. Oh, for sure. Yeah, me too.
When it came out and all that. So
I totally agree. I got one last thing.
Yeah. No,
so I think it's funny that Johnny Depp's character Mort, he's obsessed with a good ending, which is, I think, is super funny because Stephen King is not known for having good endings.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're terrible. Like me personally, like I love his books so much that I'm very forgiving when his endings just kind of fall off. Like they're not bad, but they're just, it's almost like, well, I got to wrap it up here, and there we go. But it's funny how in this story, it's all about that good ending. Oh, I got to have a good ending. Oh, that's a better ending. Oh yeah, guys, be excited. Jeremy and I love October. It is the best movie month of the year as far as genre of movies go. I love it. I get super excited.
Dude, it's gonna be so
exciting.
Bring on
Halloween.
We picked out some bangers for October for sure. So it's gonna be awesome. I'm like super pumped. This is literally, October was the hardest month to plan out which movies we were gonna do because we had so many we wanted to review. Anyways, I need to get some sleep. Josh needs to rest from the dentist. So let's get into our final verdicts.
All right, here we go. So what do you feel like the impact was when it came out in 2004, Jeremy?
When it came out, I'd give it a C because it made its money, but I don't really feel like a lot of people were talking about it. Like I said several times, I think this movie really rode the coattails of Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's why it made its money back. But it wasn't a blockbuster, so I give it a C. What about you?
I also give it a C. I think it was very middle of the road. I think because of Johnny Depp's rise in popularity, I think it was a popular movie-ish at the time. And obviously, like you said, it made its money back. It was a solid film for the time, but it definitely, I don't think it had much staying power. Which leads me into, do you feel like it's relevant at all today or has any impact today?
Nope. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it a C. That might be a little generous because it's kind of, yeah, man. I feel like people don't really. People are kind of like, oh yeah, that movie was. I remember that movie.
Right.
But yeah, I don't feel like anybody really watches that movie or cares about that necessarily anymore.
Yeah, I think
unfortunately
rating it. I forgot. Sorry. Rating it. I think I'm just gonna give it a D because I don't really feel like it. It doesn't stand out. It's just like whatever. Like you're not like it's not like we said, Stephen King. It's not like one of the ones where it's like, dude, that's a god awful movie. You have to watch it. And then, or like, oh, it's so good. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm going to change mine as well. I'm going to change to a D. I think that's fair as far as relevancy today.
Right.
That being said, personal enjoyment.
Okay. So I enjoyed watching it again and I really liked parts of it. I wanted to like this movie more than I actually did. And so I didn't get emotionally invested in it, and I just enjoyed it because it is kind of a cool ride. If you're into suspense movies and thrillers, like it's worth watching. So I give it a C.
Yeah, I gave it a C as well. But my emotional attachment was like I said earlier in the show, I just remember you being super excited about this movie, and so that kind of got me into it. So I just have that cool memory. Of watching the movie, but watching it now, it was like I almost fell asleep a couple times. It definitely had some cool moments, and then as a whole, I thought it was entertaining. But yeah, I give it a C.
Yeah, like
it's not terrible.
No, not at all.
It's not terrible.
No, and I think David Coep, though, I think he never really rises above. I think he's a better writer than a director. He just, I don't know, all of his movies have kind of the same feeling, and those movies is like, it's not bad. So, anyways, is this a midnight watch, Josh?
I am sorry to say this is a pretty solid no for me.
For me, it definitely is midnight snooze. Like, I would.
Okay, I'm going to retract what I said. I did love the intro. If for whatever reason I knew this movie was coming on, like I'm watching live TV and they're like, up next, Johnny Depp stars in Secret Window. I'd be, you know what? I'm going to watch that first 2 minutes because it was really good.
That's true.
I was surprised how much I enjoyed that.
That was pretty awesome. Yeah. No, I think that's about it for this one. So let's see. I did watch it on Tubi or Tubi. We'll have to figure that out one of these days.
Right.
Okay. Special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colvin. If you guys enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you share it with your friends or anyone that you think would like it.
Please hit that subscribe button for us. We'd love if you give us a 5-star rating or a 3 or a 4-star rating, something close to that on Apple Podcast.
Yes.
We're also on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcast, and really just about anywhere else you can get your podcast. We're on social media. We'd love to have a conversation with you on Facebook, on the Insta. We're on Instagram.
Yeah. Let's do it.
And yeah. And again, for the third week in a row, we're trying to get our YouTube channel up and running. So be on the lookout for that. And if you want to hit us up with the old email, you can reach us at themidnightwatchpodcast@gmail.com.
Dude, we're like the new mutants of a YouTube channel. It's coming. It's coming. You'll see it eventually. And hopefully it'll be better than the New Mutants, but we'll see.
I hope so, too. I hope we deliver way better than the New Mutants.
I know. Hey, I was just going to say, I have not seen the New Mutants. I am going to watch it sometime because it's freaking Marvel.
It looks cool, too, from the previews, but I've not heard good things about it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
What do they know?
Yeah, I've heard good things, though, about this podcast. All right.
Me too.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to this episode. This has been awesome. We've definitely been having some interactions on like Facebook and stuff, and just seeing the love you guys have been giving us there. We really appreciate it. This is awesome. So yeah, we're down to chat anytime. Thanks, guys. Have an awesome week. And as always, keep up the watch.